This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who, at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. We have another hard-hitting show. Of course, we bring hard-hitting cases, investigations, citizens' grand juries. We are doing the heavy lifting of the People's Justice Department. As I've said many times, we have no Justice Department. That's my alma mater. I was once proud of it. I saw politics there. But in fact, it's grown much, much worse and under Attorney General Jeff Sessions. And now we have Deputy Attorney Rod Rosenstein, who the president's leaving in power, regrettably. You have no Justice Department. And this is important that you have Freedom Watch. And we urge you to support Freedom Watch because we are standing in the stead for you. We are in the midst of a revolution, and Freedom Watch is leading the counter-revolution. This revolution was triggered by the left. I have an article that's up on our website at freedomwatchusa.org. Go there, contribute with tax-deductible contributions, sign up for Judicial Watch, for Freedom Watch's Justice League's Freudian slip, because I'm the founder of Judicial Watch, but regrettably, Judicial Watch just gets mainly documents these days. Freedom Watch is doing the heavy lifting under me, Larry Klayman. But I have an article up on WND.com today that's called The Left's Ugly Methods of Waging Revolution. And you can see in the aftermath of the Kavanaugh disgrace, the debacle, the criminal acts that occurred up there by, in fact, fomenting false information to the American people, U.S. senators, Democrats violating their oath of office, just basically trashing any sense of justice or due process for Judge Kavanaugh. You have a situation where things have even snowballed after that. This week, Miss Hillary, the wicked witch of the left, came out and advocated violence, talking about incivility, that you should not be civil when it comes to conservatives, libertarians, people of faith. And it's typical of the mainstream media, including Fox News, that they don't mention what we all know, that during the Clinton administration, over 80 people died. Some of them material witnesses in the 40-plus scandals that the Clintons had triggered and were investigated by Larry Klayman at Judicial Watch, by Ken Starr, independent counsel, by Congress. In fact, lists of dead people were left on the chairs of whistleblowers and other witnesses. A list of 80 dead people were left on the chair of Linda Tripp. We remember who she was. She's the one who exposed the Monica Lewinsky scandal, no pun intended. Those kinds of lists were left on the chairs of two White House employees in the Office of Administration who uncovered that the Clintons had been obstructing justice with over 1 million emails that should have been produced to Larry Klayman at Judicial Watch. It should have been produced to Ken Starr. That should have been produced to Congress. They claimed a computer glitch. And of course, we've heard that recently with emails that I'm seeking between Robert Mueller and the media. Those emails have been ordered to be produced by November 2nd. It was pushed back because at the last minute, before they were to have been produced formally, which was September 4th, the Justice Department, which comes in, they're a bunch of lackeys of the deep state. They don't represent anyone who believes in justice. They represent themselves. Most of them are Democrats. They voted for Hillary Clinton. They came in with nonsense to Judge Emmett Sullivan, and I'm putting it diplomatically because we're on radio, that there was a computer glitch and they couldn't produce all of it. And those emails are going to show that Mueller is engaging in criminal grand jury leaks, and we're hopeful that'll be the end of him because he's still lurking out there. He's coming back with a vengeance. But let's get back to Hillary Clinton. She advocates violence. The Deputy Attorney General in the Clinton administration, Eric Holder, who was Attorney General under Barack Obama, he also advocated violence, kicking conservatives and others That's a way of trying to mobilize the troops. That's a way of inciting violence with Antifa, Black Lives Matter. That's giving a message to the coalition of groups, ultra-left-wing groups comprising radical feminists, which we've seen in force recently with regard to the Kavanaugh confirmation, radical Muslims, radical atheists, radical anarchists, radical pro-illegal immigrant groups, radical blacks, you name it. Holder is part black. So he's been rallying the troops. And when Holder was Attorney General under Obama, he never enforced the law with regard to Black Lives Matter or the new Black Panthers Party. We know the Black Lives Matter fomented violence resulting in the death, in particular, of white cops. He never did anything about Louis Farrakhan calling for the death of white people, Jews and Christians in general. He never did anything about enforcing the new Black Panthers Party that disrupted voting in Philadelphia. It was a crime. Did nothing. He watched it happen. So he's rallying his troops. And Eric Holder, while he has a nice way on the surface, anybody who meets him says he's a nice guy. This is an evil person under the table. We know that. When someone says he's a nice guy or he's a man of integrity in Washington, D.C., run for the exits. And you have that in addition to the display that we saw after the Kavanaugh confirmation of the radical feminists pounding at the doors of the Supreme Court as if they were seizing the Bastille leading up to the French Revolution. Well, you know what? The French had noble goals at that time. These are not noble goals. This is all intended to take down the Republic, to destroy it. It's right out of Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, George Orwell's 1984. And we have a war on our hands, and Freedom Watch is fighting that war. And this week, we can see the radical forces of the left also emerge when it comes to the visit of Kanye West, the husband of Kim Kardashian, in the White House. Kanye is black. He's an African-American. He supports the president. There are other blacks who support the president, such as Alan Keyes, such as Ben Carson, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, such as Armstrong Williams. I have many black friends who support the president, so it wasn't unusual that Kanye West would be in the White House. But I want to play a clip, perhaps one of the most despicable, and the president calls him the dumbest man on cable. It's true. Don Lemon is the dumbest man. You can go to freedomwatchusa.org and see the hit piece he did on me after we joined the NSA many years ago. And he basically cut me off the live feed. He's an arrogant individual, and he's low class. So let's play this audio of some of the commentators on his show commenting about Kanye West's support and visit to the White House of Donald Trump. And this is very revealing.
But the fact is, we're not sending Kanye West to the White House to talk about these issues because he can't. He doesn't have the depth to. I want to hear what Kanye West wants to do when we're talking about criminal justice reform or prisoner reentry. The fact is, he cannot. He doesn't have that depth. Just the other day, he was talking about STEM programs and how we needed to have more STEM programs and had to turn around and ask his colleague, what did STEM mean? And so Kanye West is what happens when Negroes don't read. And we have this now, and now Donald Trump is going to use it and pervert it, and he's going to have somebody who can stand with him and take pictures.
Well, that's Bakari Sellers, and behind him came another black, Tara Setmeyer, disparaging their own people, calling Kanye West a Negro that don't read, making references to, in effect, Tara Setmeyer, that Kanye's a house end. It's okay for black people to do that, and to disparage their own people if they don't agree with them. I go through that as a conservative Jewish person. The Jewish left hates my guts. Most of the articles that are written about me, of course, I'm a Jewish Christian, they don't like that either, is the fact that I am conservative. So they try to destroy their own because if you're Jewish or black, you're not supposed to be conservative. You're not supposed to support Donald Trump. Now, I also want to play a clip right now from a White House Correspondents' Dinner back in 2014, where then President Barack Obama gets up and disparages Cliven Bundy, my very brave client, when he equated the plight of his family to the Negro in the Old South. Cliven did not know the politically correct word to use. He actually looked it up in the dictionary for the correct word for Negro. That was for black. That was Negro at the time that Martin Luther King, the great civil rights leader, was leading his marches. So let's play this and let's listen to Obama threaten Cliven Bundy, in effect, for using the word Negro, in contrast to what happened on Don Lemon's show, where blacks themselves are using Negro as a term to disparage a fellow black who supports Donald Trump and conservatives.
We have some other athletes here tonight, including Olympic snowboarding gold medalist Jamie Anderson is here. We're proud of her. Incredibly talented young lady. Michelle and I watched the Olympics. We cannot believe what these folks do. Death-defying feats. Haven't seen somebody pull a 180 that fast since Rand Paul disinvited that Nevada rancher from this dinner. As a general rule, things don't end well if the sentence starts, let me tell you something I know about the Negro. You don't really need to hear the rest of it. Just a tip for you. Don't start your sentence that way.
When it comes to taking down Cliven Bundy, you've got Barack Obama, in effect, threatening Cliven, saying, let me give you a piece of advice. Things don't end well when you start off your sentence. Let me tell you about the Negro. And that's why Cliven, I believe, in large part, was indicted along with his sons, Ammon, Ryan, Mel, and Davy, and several others, scores of others, 2 years later, by Loretta Lynch, the black attorney general of Barack Obama. No coincidence that Eric Holder is black, because this is what the left is doing. They're using sex with regard to Kavanaugh and others, radical feminists. They're using violence, and they're using race as a way to try to take over this country. And that's what my column is about this week, the left's ugly methods of waging revolution. I urge you to read it. Go to freedomwatchusa.org. You can read it there, or you can find it at WND.com. And it comes out on Monday and many other publications. But this is what we're up against, and we're going to talk about it when I come back in the next segment.
Fearless.
This Klayman, he's crazy, he's racist, he's out to kill the Democrats.
Dangerous.
I don't care, he uses the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I want to play the rest of that clip by Barack Obama because it's quite ironic and telling. And in fact, I have cases that are ongoing right now against the intelligence agencies, but he's equating that with paranoia of conservatives and others like Bundy thinking that the federal government is out to get you. And in fact, the federal government, I got to tell you, men and women, is out to get you in large part. So let's hear what Obama has to say. And he's laughing at his own jokes, just like Lemon and company laughed at their own jokes. They think they're real smug. They're real smart. They're smarter than the rest of us. We're just deplorables, and they are superior leftists that are going to take the country over ultimately.
Speaking of Rand Paul, Colorado legalized marijuana this year. An interesting social experiment. I do hope it doesn't lead to a whole lot of paranoid people who think that the federal government's out to get them and listening to their phone calls. That would be a problem.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. This mass surveillance, which was started under the regime of George W. Bush, and in fact, that was one of my criticisms of Judge Kavanaugh, now Justice Kavanaugh, is that he was one of the architects of this mass surveillance of hundreds of millions of Americans, of Supreme Court justices, ironically, of judges, of prominent businessmen like Trump, of Larry Klayman, anybody who challenges the government without probable cause that a crime is being committed, without probable cause that there's any communication with terrorists. This is a serious problem. It started in mass under under Bush, and then it got much worse under Obama. And they're joking about that. Well, it's not funny, particularly when you're the one who has committed crimes. And further than, of course, we've seen what happened with the wiretapping of the Trump Tower, the illegal FISA warrants, the Steele dossier, and all kinds of things. It continues to this day. And Larry Klayman and Freedom Watch, we have cases now in the courts on appeal, still seeking to get an injunction, which we got previously, but was vacated by the likes of Judge Kavanaugh, who doesn't take the Fourth Amendment seriously, unfortunately, And we're trying to have those injunctions reinstated, as well as large damages paid to the victims of this mass surveillance. So we are up against a war. It's a revolution, and we're waging the counter-revolution. And I ask you, good Americans out there, patriots, supporters, others, we don't want sunshine patriots, summer patriots. We want people that are willing to risk all to maintain freedom and liberty that was conceived of on July 4, 1776, in my native city of Philadelphia, where I was born. We need to fight, because you can see these people are smug, they're arrogant, they resort in violence. In the case of Hillary Clinton, the use of the word incivility, people need to remember that it wasn't the law of average, that 80 people died in and around her administration. With regard to Eric Holder, he was part of that administration. He did nothing about that. With regard to Loretta Lynch, who had indicted our clients Clive and Bundy, who stood up bravely to government tyranny at Bunkerville, that wanted to take over his ranch and sell it off to Chinese environmental interests. There are TV shows about that kind of thing today. Yellowstone with Kevin Costner, great series. I urge you to see it. I don't equate Cliven with the character that Costner plays, because he's got two sides. Cliven is totally a good man, but the ways of the American people, our rights to be free, our rights to ranch land in the West, our rights to own land anywhere in this country, our rights to make something of our heritage are under threat, because the left wants total government control. They don't believe in God. They believe in government control. The current Democrat Party are socialists and borderline communists, and they use these radical groups like the feminists, radical groups like radical blacks, radical Muslims, radical Jewish left. And again, I don't mean that in an anti-Semitic way, because I'm very proud of my Jewish heritage. This is a situation that we need to fight back, and we need to call a spade a spade. We can't shirk from it, and you hear that on this radio show. You don't hear it on Fox News. You can't say the things that I'm saying on Fox News, and Fox News performs a valuable function. But there are other networks that actually you can talk more freely, like Newsmax, like others. And our radio show, please share that with fellow patriots. Please share my columns with fellow patriots. It was the printing press in the revolution that got the colonies to unite. And we need to unite and fight back against this leftist tyranny, because if we don't, we're not going to have a country. And I'm going to be back with more of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman, because we're in a crisis at this time.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
Many of you know my life's history. I wrote a book called Horrors, Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment. Horrors. What was I talking about? I wasn't talking about the girls walking down Las Vegas Boulevard. I was talking about politicians. I was talking about judges. I was talking about lawyers. I was talking about the media. And that book was published in 2009. I wrote it right after my unsuccessful Senate campaign in Florida when I ran for the U.S. Senate. It wasn't the right time. I came out and I started Freedom Watch, and I realized I'm much better on the outside than I would be on the inside. I mean, what good is it to be one of 100 senators? Basically, nothing gets accomplished up there. Kavanaugh was a rare example of anything getting done. I mean, basically, it's just a dog and pony show. We've seen that. Also in the House of Representatives. They can only be destructive. They can't be constructive in today's world, and that's why President Trump is taking control. But that book really foretold what was going to come after that, because it was 2009. Now, almost 10 years later, the country has sunk to even lower levels. And we're left defenseless. And why are we left defenseless? Yes, we have some cases. They're going through the courts. We also have citizens' grand juries, as you know, which are starting next month. I pushed it back a little bit to save costs. I pushed it back to be able to mass volunteers that will help. Citizens' grand juries are going to start in Orange County, California, which is a conservative county. And our first targets are going to be Robert Mueller, Rod Rosenstein, Attorney General Sessions. We got to deal with the breakdown in our justice system first. Then we're going to get to Hillary Clinton, who I already indicted with a citizens' grand jury years ago. But this time we're going to do it with more teeth. We're picking the jurors from neutral voter rolls. We're going to have an independent retired judge sit over the trial. We're going to convict. We're going to sentence. And we're going to seek to have those sentences meted out. And if necessary, citizens' arrests peacefully and legally. And we have the authority to do that. We have the authority to do that because Justice Scalia back in 1992 said the grand jury belongs to the American people, not the other three branches of government. We're going to ask President Trump to enforce the sentences. That will be our initial request. But if he does not, we have to consider other peaceful and legal options to do it. And even if we don't succeed at the arrest, because we're not going to stoke violence, we don't do what the left does. We do it in a peaceful and legal way. It's going to set an example for the country that we control our own fate, that we have our justice system in our own hands, that the American people are the kings, not those who reside at the Department of Justice. Excuse me, I'm getting choked up again. And not just the judges that sit on our federal bench or on our state bench. Now, let me tell you about the judges, is that these judges that we have on the bench, there are some good ones. I can say in my 41-year career of being a trial lawyer, being a prosecutor formerly at the Justice Department, I have maybe encountered 2 or 3 judges that have the courage to stand there for the American people, that aren't playing political games, that aren't making decisions to get themselves ahead. Kavanaugh did that to get himself ahead with this decision that it was okay to have mass surveillance. He knew that that would feather the nest of the establishments of both the Republican and Democrat parties in Washington. Of course, the Democrat parties turned against him. He relied on the Republican establishment to push him through. But that's what they do. And you don't get to be a federal judge unless you suck up to the powers to be. You have to. The way the system is set up, because it relies on recommendations by the U.S. senators in the various states, and then the nomination of the president of the United States. It often hinges on your law firm that you came from, or your public interest group, or your union making large contributions, sometimes legally, other times illegally, regrettably, to the politicians. You line the pockets of the politicians, and then you get chosen. Occasionally, someone on the merits is chosen, or someone is chosen that way who turns out to be a great hero, like Judge Royce Lamberth of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, who made so many good decisions on my behalf when I ran Judicial Watch, or a judge like Stanley Sporkin, now retired, who has a lot of integrity, or Judge Emmett Sullivan, who ironically was a Bush appointee at the Superior Court in the District of Columbia, but then was chosen by Clinton. He's the only Democrat appointee I know who does things with integrity, regrettably. And even the Republicans that are chosen, George W. Bush chose terrible judges. I mean, political hacks, by and large, they're no different in many ways than the ones chosen by the Democrats. Because if it's a tough decision, they shy away from it because they don't want to ruffle feathers. They don't want to lose their invitations to the soirees, either in Washington, D.C. or in their home state. And they know that if they make a controversial decision, they'll never be chosen for the appellate court or the Supreme Court in the case of Judge Kavanaugh. And I'm glad Kavanaugh is now a justice, because if he hadn't gotten through, we would have had a watered down, much watered down conservative on the Supreme Court, with the likelihood that Democrats may take control of Congress in the midterm elections. And even if that didn't happen, we'd probably have one that was watered down. But just yesterday, I want to tell you, and this is what I love about President Trump. He doesn't worry about appearances, is that there's a column that's been written on Fox News. I mean, sometimes good columns get out there. Trump snubs Feinstein Harris to nominate conservative judges to liberal Ninth Circuit. Now, we know the Ninth Circuit is one of the worst circuits in the United States. It gets reversed over 50% of the time. And the judges that sit on that circuit, by and large, are highly politicized. Now, there are some good judges, even some liberal ones on that circuit. Judge Ronald Gould, who's a true liberal, is an honest man. He's a good man. But most of them that sit up there are not, and they play politics, and they're ultra leftists. There's the ones who enjoined a lot of President Trump's so-called travel ban executive orders. Of course, they weren't travel bans. They were just trying to get better vetting of Muslims and others coming into this country. But Trump snubbed Feinstein and Harris to nominate judges that didn't get their approval. And he doesn't need to have their approval, but that's the protocol in the history because it comes up through the political system, how these judges are chosen. Now, that's why I have proposed, and when I ran for the U.S. Senate in Florida, my opponents sometimes joked, but it wasn't any joking matter, that we need to select judges who are non-political. We need to come up with a system to do it. And I came up with a 5-part system. Number one, merits panels, where groups of experts and scholars and others would get together and look for judges that were not political, that will rule independently, that will enforce the rule of law and the Constitution. I also came up with a concept that we should have judges psychologically tested before they're even nominated to be judges, because a lot of the judges that I've encountered in my 41 career, frankly, are mentally unhinged. And when they get up on the bench, the power that they have, judges, federal judges in particular, are the most powerful people in government because they can control your life. They can send you to the slammer for 100 years. They can put you in prison until they do what you want, with contempt powers. They can do all kinds of things. And a lot of them are just simply crazy. And I came upon 2 of them, Judge William D. Keller of the Central District of Los Angeles and Judge Denny Chin of the Southern District of New York, who basically are unhinged lunatics on the bench. And that's what triggered my starting Judicial Watch and then continuing with that in and around 1994. We need judges who are psychologically balanced. Before you become a judge, this was my 3rd proposal, is that you should go to a school to learn how to be a judge. Take an extra year after law school, get an LLM, that's a master's degree. We do that for tax lawyers, so they have the expertise, and foreign policy lawyers sometimes. But judges need to be trained in proper demeanor, how to be a judge, how to analyze a problem. Right now, they're put on the bench, and all of a sudden, it's decided that they can make just decisions and analytically that they can do the job. But lawyers are a lot like Dr. Strangelove. If they are a prosecutor, they see things for the prosecution. If they were a defense lawyer, they see things for the defense. If they were a government lawyer, they scratch the backs of government. If they were a former in-house union lawyer, they scratch the backs of the unions. And they don't know how to separate themselves from their past. And every time I've asked a judge recently to get off a case because they're too close to the case because of their past, they refuse. They actually violate the law. Under 28 U.S.C. 144, when you file an affidavit saying that the judge is biased and prejudiced, you're entitled to get another judge. But judges have never enforced that. On a one-time basis, you can do that. California actually has a system where the first judge that's so-called randomly chosen, you can actually strike him like you strike jurors. Well, we need neutral judges. And that's why everybody comes from a certain walk of life. They need to be trained to be judges. And then, because judges make decisions, frequently shoot from the hip, the 4th part of my proposal was get judges insurance. That'll be part of their package of being a judge. And if they make a grossly negligent or intentionally wrong decision, don't force a litigant, a party, most of whom don't have the riches of big corporations and labor unions, to take an appeal. It's very expensive. Anytime you're in the legal system, it's expensive. Even a banana peel personal injury case can cost a couple $100,000 to prosecute. Have these decided by arbitrators, neutral arbitrators, to compensate the victims. And last but not least, make sure that judges do not have life tenure. Right now, the founding fathers gave them life tenure, which means that they think they're above the law. The founding fathers said they could be removed for bad behavior, but that's never, ever happened in recent history. There's been only about 3 judges impeached in the last decades, going way back. And one of them, Alcee Hastings from Miami, was actually then elected to Congress, and he's been there ever since. He was impeached for bribery. Unbelievable. So these judges are not held accountable, and we need a way to remove them. So I say term limits, 2 4-year terms, renewable for good behavior at the 4th term, and bring in new, fresh blood on the judiciary so they don't think that they are kings in robes. And then last but not least, and perhaps this is my 6th proposal, let's pay them better so we get the best and the brightest on the bench. You know, I'm not in favor of using tax dollars unnecessarily, but frankly, they need to be paid almost at the level of private lawyers, because the judges we have on the bench, because they aren't paid well, and we don't find out much about this because the FBI doesn't really investigate, they're prone to taking bribes and other favors, and it does happen. This is the real world. And because they're not paid as well, they resent the private lawyers that come in front of them frequently because they think that we're better paid. Well, of course, at Freedom Watch, I'm not better paid running a nonprofit, but this is their attitude. They kind of have an arrogance up there on the bench. And this is the problem that we have with our judiciary. We don't have the best and the brightest. We choose them in a political way, and they are our last line of defense. And that's why we now have citizens' grand juries, because you can't rely on these judges to mete out justice. In a situation like Klayman Bundy, they were kept in prison for 2 years. They were financially destroyed, people in and around them. I've got cases in the courts right now for some of the defendants that peacefully protested with Bundy, who the government even didn't present any evidence. They just threw him into the indictment for the heck of it, because they wanted to set an example that one should not question the federal government. If you do, we will crush you. If you question the right of the federal government to charge grazing fees or have them come in and kill your cattle and beat up your family and seize your land, we will crush you. And these judges in Gloria Navarro in Las Vegas, Nevada, the only reason the supersedious indictment was dismissed was because her own career was on the line, because it became such an embarrassment. And even a mainstream newspaper was saying that the prosecutors have a friend in Judge Gloria Navarro. When it turned out that the federal government was lying, that they were hiding evidence, she had no choice. And what happens now? The case is on appeal. Jeff Sessions has done nothing. He's allowed it to continue. The government's trying to overturn the dismissal of the indictment. So I'm going to be right back with more of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. This is why at Freedom Watch, we fight in a number of ways. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, support our cause, sign up for our Justice League. We are your real Justice Department.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Now, this is the verdict segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. It's where I wrap up the day's shows. I want you all to go to our website at freedomwatchusa.org. My new book, which is called Essays of a Mad Man. It's all of the columns that I wrote from the very beginning when I began to run Judicial Watch. Over 600 columns, and I'm still writing them, and I'm updating this book as we speak. If you give a contribution of $150 or more, which is tax deductible, we'll send you the book free of charge. Because it tells you the decline in this country. It tells you how we have to fight the establishments of both political parties. It gives you a running account of what's been going on in this country. And it needs to be said. And that's why I say share the blog of this radio show. You can find it at radioamerica.com. You can find it at freedomwatchusa.org. Share my columns. Sign up for our free newsletters. Donate to our cause. We need to ramp up. We need to get bigger. We have cases that just don't seek to hold Hillary Clinton accountable, the wrongful death at Benghazi, Robert Mueller, criminal grand jury leaks, holding radical Muslims accountable, Taliban, Afghanistan, and others who killed our brave heroes of Extortion 17. I'm going to be filing a case this week for Sheriff Arpaio against the New York Times. We have a leftist media strike force. They defamed him and tried to destroy him. We've got cases, class actions against the social media companies that are censoring conservative libertarians and people of faith in terms of furthering this left-wing revolution that I talked about throughout this show. We have cases against the intelligence community for mass surveillance that are going on. This is why you need to support Freedom Watch. You know, Judicial Watch gets out there and Fitton gets on TV, and that's fine. And I'm glad that Judicial Watch continues. That's my little baby. I founded it. Most people still think I'm there. But they're just getting documents. Now, that's great. The networks want the documents because it gives them something to talk about each night, whether it's Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity or Judge Jeanine Pirro. But you know what? None of that actually does anything. It's just for show. It's not for dough. It's not about bringing about justice. It's about boosting ratings on Fox News. It's about boosting advertising dollars. It's about keeping the populace agitated. So they'll turn in and watch each night. You can watch Hannity's show every night. We've got great breaking news, landmark news, but whatever happens, zip, nothing. So that's why I'm in the courts. That's why I'm writing. That's why we have citizens' grand juries, which are taking the legal system back to the American people, because our country is sinking away. We don't have to resort to violence. We don't want to get back to what our founding fathers had to do. They broke the law to enforce the law. They defied the edicts of King George III because they became too tyrannical for the colonies to accept, whether it was taxes or whether it was seizing the arms. That's where the Second Amendment comes from, whether it was banning militias. That's why we have a Second Amendment, a right to bear arms. That's why we actually can have militias. Militias are not a dirty word. They're not. The American people can band together peacefully and legally, protect themselves, to fight against the tyranny of federal and state governments. And we are trying to do that at Freedom Watch. And we need your strong support. We need you to join our cause. Go to freedomwatchusa.org. Read my columns. Listen to this radio show. Look at our YouTubes, which are up there at freedomwatchusa.org. Handsomely contribute tax-deductible contributions because we need to get bigger. We're the mouse that roared. There's nothing funny about what's going on today. And when you heard these black commentators with Don Lemon, who's a real disgrace, laughing at them using the word Negro against their own people, and then Barack Obama laughing at threatening Cliven Bundy for using the word Negro, thinking that they're so great, pounding their chests. When you listen to these feminists on TV ripping people apart, saying basically that men have no rights, when other people have more rights than all people of the United States, they should all have equal rights. I'm, in effect, a civil rights lawyer. Then you know that this country's headed down the drain. And that's why you need to go to freedomwatchusa.org. Sign up for our Justice League. You are the superheroes. You are Batman. You are Superman. You are Wonder Woman. You are Aquaman. You are the Flash. We can take this country back. So I thank you for listening to the show each week. God bless you. God bless your family. God bless America. And God save America. I'll be back next week.